We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the darkened hour.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Adam.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Okay, so we're heading down to sunny Florida today, Adam, to talk about one of the most obscure things in 9/11 studies, I think, and something I did not know about until you told me, and that is the attempted assassination on George W. Bush that potentially, possibly, is alleged to have taken place on September 11th.
That's right. Interesting story in itself is that something that in his book, Welcome to Terrorland, that Daniel Hopsiker talks about is that you will get the news 24 hours after an event happens, and then the cover-up takes place. And no more proof of that is told than in this story. And we'll start off with a reporter by the name of Monica Yadov, who's a reporter for the ABC News, where she interviews a man by the name of Zain Baleen Omer, who's a Middle Eastern native who's residing in Sarasota, Florida. This is where George Bush was staying at in his hotel. Now, Omer contacts the police in Sarasota, and he tells them that during the evening hours, a friend of his who in the past has made violent threats against Bush had come to visit him out of nowhere. Now, the man whose name is redacted in the police reports is quoted as Gandhi, G-H-A-N-D-I. And so the man whom the police report as Gandhi told Omer that he was just visiting in town because he wanted to get a friend out of jail. But Omer actually was very wary of Gandhi, and he called the Sarasota police because he knew that Bush was in town, and he felt that this was too coincidental that he would visit him out of the blue and give him this story about getting a friend out of jail. So when he calls the Sarasota police, they go and tell the Secret Service, who's with Bush at the hotel. Within hours, the Secret Service go to Gandhi's home, an apartment he was staying with, and there were two other men with him. So that makes it 3 individuals. And they're all from the Sudan. One of those people, by the name of Faithul Rahman Omer, would be interrogated for 10 hours, approximately 10 hours. That's a long time for one person if they didn't have anything to do with what was going on. And the questions were, did they know that Bush was in town? Are you affiliated with any terrorist groups? Do you personally know Osama bin Laden? And he answered no to all these questions. Then Zain Baleen Omer tells the Secret Service about a beauty supply store that was also proprieted by a man by the name of Hakeem. His name is redacted in the report, but his quote, his name that the police were using was Hakeem. Hakeem was also somebody who was quite fanatical into Western-style livelihood. So the Secret Service goes to this beauty supply store, and they detained Hakim and questioned the owner and the people that were there as well. Now, what he told agent that Gandhi itself, the person that was arrested in the apartment, was a member of the Sudanese People Liberations Army, which is, for the people who don't know, a Christian guerrilla group fighting the fundamentalist Muslim government in the Sudan. Now, coincidental is that Osama bin Laden was once in the Sudan, but he was evicted out of the country due to the United States forcing Hassan Tarabi out. Hassan Tarabi, who was the emir of the National Liberation Front and close friends of bin Laden, and he had to get him out of the country.
Okay, and just to state the obvious, Osama bin Laden was not associated with fundamentalist Christian resistance groups in Sudan. Right. Quite the opposite. So
right. Now, the men taken into custody have all been released, and the FBI and the Secret Service actually said that they found that the incidents, both incidents regarding Hakim and Gandhi, were unrelated to the attacks. Okay, which is quite suspicious in its own right. Now, according to FBI spokesman Sarah Oakes, he says, quote, from the book of Welcome to Terrorland by Hopsicker, quote, nationwide, the FBI has received over 200,000 such tips, with more than 5,000 of the tips coming into the Tampa office alone, end quote. Now, afterwards, Yadov, the reporter, went back to the beauty store to do a follow-up interview with the people that were the proprietor and the people that were working in the store, but she found out that it was closed and shuttered. And Hakim was nowhere to be found, Hakim, the owner. And Omer, the person who reported the incident, he was also not to be found. So according to Daniel Hopsicker, did a follow-up on both Hakim and Omer 2 years after September 11th attacks. He went to the INS and he called the spokesman for the INS in the Tampa office, and they gave him the runaround, saying that they don't know of any such Hakim or Muhammad Omer. And so Hopsicker said in the book that it's quite convenient that these people were giving the blanket, so to speak, by the INS and by the Secret Service and by the FBI, and like the incident never happened. Well, according to Shay Sullivan, who's a reporter for the Florida Observer, Florida, it was something Observer. I think it's Florida Observer. On the night of September 10th, Bush and his entire entourage, Andrew Card and everybody else, stayed at the Colony Beach and Tennis Resort on Longboat Key, which is a narrow barrier of luxury homes, which are fringing off the Gulf of Mexico. At 6:30 a.m. on September 11th, President Bush goes for a full-mile jog around the golf course at the Colony Beach and Tennis Resort. Now, there's a news clip you can find on YouTube where he sees this tall, I think it was a Secret Service guy who was a marathon runner, and Bush challenges him to take a jog with him. They do. And just a half hour before that, at 6 a.m., Longboat Fire Key Marshal Carol Mooneyhan, who's at the front desk of the Colony Beach and Tennis Resort, where Bush was preparing for his morning jog, where he was standing, overheard a strange, really peculiar exchange between a colony receptionist who was at the desk and a security guard. And what the security guard told the receptionist was that a white van had come to the gate, and the white van had 4 Middle Eastern men in it. And they pulled up to the colony, and they said that they had a poolside interview with the president that day. And 2 of the people, the driver in the passenger seat, had press credentials, but he couldn't. He was standing at a point where he couldn't read what press they were working for, what media outlet they were working for. Now, the quote self-proclaimed reporters then asked a Secret Service guard by name. So the guard from the security relayed the request to the receptionist, and then she called the Secret Service in the hotel about the incident. So the Secret Service guard then relays to her that they never heard of that name before, and that nothing on the report states that Bush was to have a poolside interview. So with that, the security guard, the security guard then tells the four men in the van that they don't have any report that they were to interview the president, and that they are to contact Human Resources Office at the White House. So they drive off. The unnamed Secret Service agent then tells someone within the Sarasota FBI, who's also on site, saying, quote, that was really strange, that he would direct agents to look into that matter, end quote. Now, according to the book written by Daniel Hopsicker, Welcome to Terrorland, he suspects that it may have been very well that operation, the assassination attempt, may have been planned by Mohammed Atta, the suspected American Airline 11 hijacker, that he was going to have this planned assassination on Bush. And I'll tell you why. Now I'll quote from the book, quote, based on eyewitness accounts, the Sarasota assassination attempt was probably coordinated by Mohammed Atta himself, reported the Observer. If 3 eyewitnesses are correct, terrorist hijacker Mohammed Atta came to the Holiday Inn Hotel and Suites, Longboat Key on September 7th, the day the media announces George Bush would be coming and to speak at the Sarasota school. Atta may have been there to meet a second hijacker as well, Marwan al-Shehi, end quote. Now, Hopsicker actually does his own independent reporting, and he goes into the Holiday Inn. Now, and he interviews somebody, a bartender called Darlene Sivers, and she claims that Atta was definitely in the area, and that Atta sat on the bar stool drinking rum and coke, and that, quote, she says, quote, but I didn't have any real interaction with him. A bartender can tell when a customer doesn't want to talk, and he didn't. After 15 minutes, he arrived. He was joined by a second man who didn't speak English, and I asked him what he liked to drink, end quote. Now, that person was Marwan al-Shehi, she says later. To back up that story, also in Sarasota, just a few days before the attack, Mark Bean, who's the hotel's assistant food and beverage director, claims that the second man that walked into that bar was Marwan al-Shehi when shown photographs. Later on that day, after the original van leaves, at approximately 8:50 a.m., a man who stood on the Sarasota bayfront waiting for the presidential motorcade to pass when Bush is leaving, he sees a very old white dilapidated van. By the way, the reporter's van in the beginning, with the four guys, was also a white van. But this was a second van that had 2 Middle Eastern men. And they roll down the window and they pass by and they see the guy and the crowd, and they're screaming out the window, down with Bush, F Bush, and they're raising their fists in the air. They're screaming out the window, both the driver and the passenger. And according to the official schedule, the motorcade leaves Emma Booker Elementary School. That's where Bush went at 8:50 a.m. Now, why is this important? Well, 2 days prior, a day prior to the assassination attempt on Bush, that's what this was. General Ahmad Shah Massoud, who's the leader of the Afghan Northern Alliance, is fighting against the Taliban, Mullah Omar. And this is a long civil war. This is the middle of the second civil war in Afghanistan. And the Taliban is hosting Osama bin Laden. And through that, there was 2 Al-Qaeda agents posing as journalists. And for 2 weeks before September 10th, they were trying to get an interview with Shah Massoud. On September 10th, Shah Massoud actually relents and says, yeah, let's do the interview. And so the 2 men go, and they're like 20 feet right from him. They're setting up the camera. And as the camera is being set up, it explodes. And it kills both of the reporters. Massoud actually survives the blast, but he's terribly wounded. So he goes onto a car. They put his body in the car and they're driving toward a hospital nearby in Afghanistan, trying to get him to medical aid, but he expires. But to keep the morale alive for the Northern Alliance, they lie and they tell the soldiers on the front lines that Massoud survived the blast. But they find out a week later that he dies, and Taliban beats the Northern Alliance, actually, in the long run. And that is quite coincidental when you see what the incident happened with Florida and what happened just a day prior, which Ahmad Shah Massoud.
Okay, let me just ask you a couple of questions about that event in Afghanistan before we come back to Florida. Is it generally considered that that assassination was connected to 9/11 or coincidental to it? And by that I mean, was it, it just seems if it's Al-Qaeda's involved, if Bin Laden is involved, he knows that 2 days from now, the biggest Al-Qaeda operation ever is going to kick off. And is it a case of getting Ahmad Massoud out of the way first because of whatever reason? I don't know. Or is it really just a coincidence and that the Taliban wanted him out of the way and it just happened to be on the 9th of September that they did it? Do you have an opinion on that?
Sure. There's 2 points. One, if we go with the point that the Taliban had no prior warning to September 11th, then this was a non-correlated incident. If you go by the fact that the Taliban knew that bin Laden was to conduct an operation like September 11th, then this is, of course, part of that operation. In the fact that just months prior, the CIA went to visit Massoud, and they tried to implore him to give up the civil war, because in the long run, they found out the Taliban just had too many members in its groups and ranks, and that the other warlords, like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, was going to join the fight anyway, and then it would just be a matter of time before the Northern Alliance loses. But Shah Massoud disregards the orders and he keeps fighting. Now, if you go by Mullah Omar, and he states publicly, and even years later, before he dies, that if they had known that bin Laden was conduct operations against the United States, the September 11th attack, he would have not have let bin Laden stay there. And the reason he gave was simple, was that he knew that the American response would destroy the Afghan infrastructure, and the blame would be on the Taliban. He's right. The Afghan infrastructure would be destroyed, but what bin Laden wanted, and he states this in an interview with Taysir Alawani a year later, in an interview, he states that what he wanted was that a long, drawn-out war that would hurt the American economy in Afghanistan. He's right. So both Omar and bin Laden would be right on different accounts. But if you want me to say that the Taliban have foreknowledge about September 11th attacks, there is no reason to know that they did.
So you think it's coincidental? The timing?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it is. Just judging.
I'm just interested to know, what do you think the motivation of the bombers would be? Because we looked at motivation regarding bombers in, like the embassy bombers, say, for suicide attacks, and then on for the Cole and 9/11 itself. But do you think that the guys actually who were prepared to die for this saw it as being, keeping Afghanistan as pure and Islamic by supporting the Taliban over the Northern Alliance? It was like a holy thing to do.
The Taliban, this is going to be a very tough question, because the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, even though they're both in their theology as Salafists, they have different ideologies in terms of their political motivations. Taliban, even though they find the United States to be unnecessary in Afghanistan, they have no international, they're not an international threat.
Yeah, I know. I just mean with regard to the motivation of the bombers for Ahmad Massoud. Okay.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Okay, I see. What, in regards to that, yes, because the Taliban actually wanted Afghanistan to be a total Islamic caliphate,
and people were prepared to commit suicide bombing for that and give up their lives. Essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. back to Florida then, and I suppose I've got a few questions on that. But you actually contacted one of the journalists involved. Now, I don't know if you want to name him.
Sure.
Yeah, but and it's actually the Longboat Observer is the name of the paper. I've just looked it up.
Right. Okay.
Maybe you want to talk about that, and then I'll weigh in with a couple of questions.
Yeah, the reporter, which he really didn't want to be contacted, but I told him who I was and told him why I was interested. So I'm going to leave his name off. But he was a reporter for the Longboat Observer, which I got wrong before I said Florida Observer. Longboat, thank you, by the way. Yes, I contacted him through email. And this was about 2.5 years ago, a little bit way back. And I talked to him about this incident. And this incident's hardly ever talked about by even the most ardent researchers of 9/11. I can understand because it's the story really is not very known at all. So when I contacted him, I posed 4 questions to him about why the story was so restricted, why what happened after September 11th, why the story was given no press. And I also asked him what became of the fire captain Mooneyhan, who reported the incident. According to the reporter, who responded a day later, excuse me, he says that the Secret Service and the FBI actually visited the office of the Longboat Observer and interviewed his editor. And the editor actually told the reporter to cut the story off. And the reason was simple, is that the Secret Service didn't want the story to go any further than what he reported on September 11th, September 12th and 13th. And when asked about the Mooneyhan incident, the Captain Mooneyhan, who told the reporter about his incident, the reporter actually said that when he did a follow-up with Mooneyhan actually changed his whole story and says, to the best of my ability, I'll quote, I have a family and I don't want to compromise them and my livelihood, end quote.
Yeah, I've got the quote right in front of me, actually, and that's exactly right. I have a creative thing about it. But he actually said he was visited by the CIA and the Secret Service after 9/11, which is interesting for a couple of reasons. I don't know what the Secret Service's domestic mandate is, but I'm assuming they have one. Makes sense. The CIA don't like what they're doing visiting people in Florida. That wouldn't be within their mandate. And we'll also revisit the theme of the CIA and FBI visiting people in Florida to pressure them to change their story or forget certain things in coming episodes.
Right. Well, with the CIA probably is that also the Huffman Aviation was known to be a CIA drop-off point for drugs.
Well, we'll go on to that in coming episodes.
Right.
So, what do you make of this whole thing? Adam? It's only 2 weeks ago that we were talking about the coincidence of George W. Bush being friends with Prince Bandar bin Sultan, who financed 2 of the hijackers, right? Which, now most Americans aren't personally friends with anyone who had anything to do with the September 11th attacks, except the president is. And it just seems like a strange coincidence that he would go to the same place in Florida as the lead hijacker was being spotted, okay? Like beyond a coincidence. So that's a weird thing. And then you could almost tell the story where this is, okay, an attempt by Islamic fanatics to kill the president, except that it's Christian animists from Sudan who you would think would actually probably suspect they might get a better deal out of the evangelical Christian president, George W. Bush. So that's a strange kind of curveball. And then you've got the Secret Service and the like running around trying to cover this whole thing up. So how do you deal with those? Yeah, what do you think of those curveballs in there? And and if they are Christian animist types, what could Muhammad Attar's possible connection to them be? That's just...
There's too many coincidences here. And I think what we have to start with is that why would they want to kill Bush in the fact that, and why would the Secret Service and the FBI want to kill the story so quick if it was a non-related incident, as they say? And everything else, every answer will be based on speculation.
Yeah.
And we could say that Atta, who came to Florida just 4 days before the attacks, knew about Bush visiting there and went to try and kill him. But what would his links be with the SPLA, as you say? There is none. There's no links, direct links to there. So who are these people? And why would the FBI and the INS cover up them being deported out of the country if there was an unrelated incident, as the FBI states? Plus, you also have to into the fact that if the FBI, if you want to say that the FBI wanted to get Bush out of the way and have Cheney run the country, which he was doing in Washington on September 11th, making the most important decisions in the first 3 hours, you could say that they wanted Bush to get out of the way just for that, right? So, yeah, I mean, this has many questions more than answers. So be careful as to the answers itself.
Sure. The other thing that just strikes me as odd, how would someone go about acquiring the name of Secret Service agent? Right, like, I mean, the answer's kind of in the question, really, the word secret. So how easy is that to do? I don't know. And does that imply some kind of inside knowledge, right? And I'm not even necessarily suggesting inside knowledge as in a conspiracy headed by Dick Cheney. I'm talking about in the way that during the 1993 bombing and so on, these groups had people in planning offices in New York, like Al-Qaeda itself can infiltrate US government structures. So, but can you speak to that about this high strangeness of this guy having the name of a Secret Service agent?
Right, but that agent's name didn't exist. Now,
was it an incorrect name?
Right, it was an incorrect name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that's what clarifies that then, right?
But no, it's a good question because it actually states that these people who were in the van really didn't think this through and think that there would be a personal security detail with Bush, and that they thought that by suggesting the person's name, they would get an interview and go through the gates. So they obviously didn't think this through as to the second layer of security that the Bush would entail. That's what I would say about that.
Yeah.
Because if this was a intricate operation with these guys, they would have known that. So what kind of information were they going by? Well, they obviously knew that he was there. So where did they read that through the papers because they announced 4 days prior he was coming to that, and they tried to assassinate him. And if you have to imply, if you want to imply that maybe an element within the FBI or Secret Service relayed that information to these guys, that they would give an actual name and that they would get in.
Yeah. So they would have had more. So yeah, sure.
Right. So I don't think that anybody from the Secret Service or the FBI wanted this to happen. Although it's, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of questions regarding about that incident and why it was shut up. And that's what's puzzling to me, is that when the FBI told the reporter from the Florida Longport Observer that this was not correlated to the attacks, why the hush up? Yeah, makes you wonder.
Okay, well, I guess that's all we can say on this one, Adam, and it will probably forever remain a mystery, barring information coming forward, or maybe we'll live long enough to have documents declassified. But until that point, we'll do a follow-up, in 50 years when the documents come out. Until then, sure. we'll leave it as a mystery.
Sure. If I may intervene.
Yeah.
The only information that you could be privy to is the FBI reports regarding this incident if you were to release them to a Freedom of Information request.
Okay.
And that will be up to them if they want to redact it or unredact the whole report, which most likely will be redacted.
Yeah, which is kind of telling in itself. Okay, well, I think we're going to be staying in Florida for a while and looking through some of the strange goings on there. So thank you for that, Adam, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Richard, for having me.